Good evening, everyone. Um, you're very welcome to attend Gilbert's normal group Monday night. I am tonight's guest speaker. My name is Ian. You may have encountered me here before, but it's a great honor to be speaking with you all. So we shall begin as we always do with joining of palms, bowing, and the recitation of the four great vows. So join palms, bow. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings of self-nature. I vow to cut off endless vexations of self-nature. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma of self-nature. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood of self-nature. Well, for tonight, I've got what I would consider to be a bit of a treat to share with you. We're actually going to be dropping straight into the middle of one of my favorite sutras. And I only have access to this second half of it. This is a sutra that's divided into two fascicles, and I've only been able to find the second fascicle in English. The translation that I have is from a website which I highly recommend. It's sutrasmantras.info. And they have just dozens of translations of wonderful sutras, many that I've never encountered outside of there. And when I was really getting into the study of Buddha Dharma, I would just have these loaded up on my phone. And anytime I had a little bit of break, I would pull one up and I would read through. And it took me many months, but eventually I made it through all the translations. But this particular one is the Sutra of Detecting Good or Evil Karma and Requital. It is the 12th sutra on this website. And like I said, I've only been able to encounter the first fascicle in Chinese. So if anyone has the first one in English, please help me out. I would love to read it because it is just absolutely stupendous. So we drop straight into this sutra, um, and I'll just begin. At that time, firm, pure faith Bodhisattva Mahasattva asked Earth Store Bodhisattva Mahasattva, please indicate a viable way for the sake of those who seek the Mahayana. So this immediately sends me back to my most recent deep dive of study, which was the Awakening of Mahayana Faith treatise. And in that treatise, it treated Mahayana a little bit differently than many sutras do. It treated it more like the absolute rather than as a vehicle that could be compared one to another. And so I immediately get that same feeling from this sutra. So Earth Store Bodhisattva Mahasattva said, good man, if there are sentient beings that seek the Mahayana, they should first know the initial fundamental karma to do. So, what is the initial action to take? How do we get started when we're trying to realize or recognize, develop this intimacy with the absolute, with mind? To know the initial fundamental karma to do means that they need to cultivate faith and understanding by relying upon the one true reality. So to me, this immediately brings to mind Master Lin Chi, who at the beginning of his exhortations said that what students need to do is seek out the true and proper understanding. This is what right view is. And so right view is the foundation of this. You have to encounter the right view, you have to look into it, and you have to have faith in it. And this is the path of study and practice. And so sutras like this, treaties, all of these things are going to help to cultivate faith and understanding. As their faith and understanding grow in strength, they will quickly develop the Bodhisattva character type. I personally love this because it is indicating or pointing to that any true understanding, any good study and practice, it's very natural for this bodhisattva character type to just come out, for this compassion to awaken. The text that I'm currently working on a deep dive is the Sutra on the Ten Grounds. And I did not feel as though I was capable of presenting it in this group right now. It's pretty deep, and I need to get through it all. But one of the things that it points out in the first ground, the key feature is that faith has to have this place of primacy. So you have to have faith in the tradition and the teachings, in your teacher, and in your own self-nature. Gilbert, he loves to just give the whole list of those things. But once this faith has been established, the thing that the practitioner has to continually bring to mind, the guardrails that prevent their practice from moving towards that of the Shravaka or the Pratyeka Buddha, is the the consideration of sentient beings. And in the Ten Ground Sutra, they really talk about the giving rise to vows as being one of the most important things. So now we're going to step into the one true reality. So the one true reality refers to the true mind of sentient beings, which, with inherent purity, without hindrances, has neither birth nor death. So again, for me, this throws me straight back to that awakening of Mahayana treatise, because it talked about this as being the central principle when it was looking at unfolding or exploring the meaning of Mahayana. It looked at it in terms of the principle of the mind of sentient beings. And in that particular treatise, it divided it into um, the mind that was pure suchness, and then the mind that was conditioned. However, for this particular sutra, it's really focusing in on the first one, the one true reality of suchness. So, like space, it does not differentiate, but accommodates all, and is equal in and universal to all. With the ultimate one appearance, it is perfect everywhere in worlds in the 10 directions, non-dual and differentiation free. So this one appearance, there are a couple different interpretations that you can use to get some mileage out of it. The one appearance can be no appearance. The one appearance can be just mind. But these two bits with regards to non-dual and differentiation free, these are going to be very important as we continue our investigation today. So for all sentient beings, voice hearers, pratyeka Buddhas, bodhisattvas, the true mind is the same, which is true suchness, silent and never tainted, with neither birth nor death. So we hear this constant refrain, neither birth nor death. Um, Pure, never tainted. All of these things pointing towards just the fundamental nature of mind. And the various Chan masters, they're always pointing this out. Actually don't have it at hand. I normally do for my presentations, but there's one Chan master who this is how he starts his teaching, that you have to recognize the Buddha nature, and that the shortcut is to always return to, always to cleave to that and have the faith in its inherent purity. So why? Because the mind that differentiates is like illusions without any reality. Now, this is the point where it starts talking about the conditioned nature of things. And this is a lot of the meat of what I'm looking to investigate today, because I was trying to find a jumping off point for a very central matter in the sutra that I studied recently, the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra, what they call Citta, Manas, and Vijnana. And this is often translated, I've seen it as mind, thought, and consciousness, or mind, will, and consciousness. But this is the mind that differentiates. And this is something that it's important for us to look into. I wouldn't say that it is the essential matter, because the essential matter is Buddha nature. But when we have an understanding as to this mind that differentiates, it can really give us a good ability to focus and orient correctly. So let's look into this. So citta, often translated as mind, is, you could look at it as being the total impression or the basic awareness of things. Um, in the Samdhi Nirmochana and in the Lankavatara Sutra, they point towards this as being the alaya Vijnana, the storehouse consciousness. In the Abhidharma, Citta is one of the absolutes. It's something that you can't break down any further than just consciousness. And, I think that there are 89 or 121 different states of consciousness in the Abhidharma. And it really looks at Citta as being the the recognition, the cognition of whatever happens to be arising. And it's colored by the mental factors that are there, but it's what knows objects. So we can see that it is this basic awareness, the total impression. Manas. Manas is very interesting because it is often pointed to as the seventh consciousness. So in the Yogacara scheme, it's the seventh. And it is the reflection on what is known. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Vijnana is the discrimination of what is known. And this is pointing towards the first through the sixth consciousness. So you got your eye consciousness, your ear consciousness, your nose, your tongue, your body, and then your mental consciousness. So all of these consciousnesses, these are lumped under Vijnana, even though in the description, like it's the Alaya Vijnana or the Manas Vijnana. They're all given Vijnana, but when you see this particular schema in the sutras, Citta, Manas, and Vijnana, this is how they're referring to them. This is how they're dividing them. So Vijnana is this consciousness that arises in dependence of difference. So you have an organ, you have the eye with the sensitive matter in the eye that responds to light. And that light is comprised of the sense field. So each of our sense consciousnesses are kind of like just this explosion that's happening. We have an explosion in the visual spectrum and the visual sphere. If you look out in front of you, there are so many shapes, there are so many colors, and they're all appearing just at once. Likewise, in the auditory sphere, there are many different sounds that are presenting themselves simultaneously. We have all of these different vibrations that are hitting the sensitive matter in the ear. And it is this responding to difference that brings into the the realm this sensory experience. Um, this is very important to have a recognition of because even the word Vijnana itself, it points towards difference. So the etymology of Vijnana, and this is something that I actually remember Citta talking about in a presentation a long time ago, and it really stuck with me. If you look at the roots of this word Vijnana, you have two parts. You have the Nya, which is to know. You'll see jnana a lot in a lot of the sutras, and it's knowledge or direct knowledge. But this V part, the V in front of the nana, is apart or difference. So Vijnana is entirely comprised of difference. Any consciousness, any Vijnana, it is the basis. It is that is what it is at the end of the day. And as this Sutra of detecting good or evil, karma and requital is pointing out, the mind that differentiates is like illusions without any reality. So this is why it's important for us to kind of look into this, to see what this is actually meaning, because you know, I'm just parroting Gilbert, but so many times when we're doing our studies, we'll encounter something and we won't really know what it means. We might feel as though we have kind of a sense of it, and we'll just continue charging on. But when we do this, we leave behind so much of this depth that can change our understanding, that can really allow the penetration to occur. So we've talked about Vijnana. I want to again look at this manas because manas is very important. In the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra, it does not it's not presented as a separate consciousness the way that it is in the Yogacara school. So the later developments in the Yogacara tradition pointed at the manas as being its entirely own separate consciousness. But in the Samdhi Nirmochana, it's really pointed to more as the ability of mind to reflect itself. So it talks about just this explosion of consciousness that we have. All of the light that enters in the eye strikes the sensitive matter and paints this incredible landscape of shape and color, sound, anything that's present to interact with the sensitive matter of the various organs. It blooms in consciousness, but it doesn't bloom in any way that is separate at all. Like it's just all together. The only separation is between sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought. So at this point, this is the only division that there is. Sight is just sight, this direct sensory experience of sight. Sound is just that. It's a direct sensory experience of all the sound that happens to be interacting with the sensitive material of the ear. It's just all coming through all at once. But manas, what it does is it takes like a Polaroid. It takes a picture of what's happening in consciousness. So the sense consciousness that has come into being and passed away, it holds on to that that sense consciousness which just passed away and now is capable of reflecting on one thing at a time. It establishes the appearance of continuity because the nature of consciousness by itself is that it comes into being and it passes away and instantaneously. If you look at or study the Abhidharma, there are so many of these thought moments that happen even in the snap of a fingers. Depending on which commentary you're looking at, 17 of these thought moments are happening in the snap of a finger, or 17,000 in the snap of a finger. But they are happening so quickly, they arise and they pass away. But this manas is what enables this appearance of continuity to be established because it's reflecting on one thing at a time. And it does this incredibly quickly, incredibly fast. And it allows relating to the sensory experience in a conceptual way. So it allows thoughts and ideas of things to be mediated. So if you're looking at my screen, you see behind me um, all of this stuff, all of these shapes and colors. But it isn't until Manas gets involved and starts to differentiate, starts to apply the concepts that we can actually begin to interact with the things. Whenever Manas comes up, it is always bringing along with it stuff. There is an author, Sally B. King, and she wrote a wonderful book, Buddha Nature, on the Buddha Nature treatise. And she called this reflexive bifurcation because when Manas is getting involved, it's freeze framing the sense consciousness and it is interjecting something, something extra, something that wasn't there before, because there is a sense of separation now, because there's this reflectivity that's now happening. And so this reflexive bifurcation, as she calls it, is this automatic process by which duality is established. Because in the moment of a sensory experience, just a sensory experience, there's nowhere for self to appear. There's nowhere for self to arise because there's just all of this blooming, this blossoming of senses. But when the manas gets involved, that's where self, duality begins to appear. So this is a little bit on the mind that differentiates. So I'm going to continue with the Sutra of Detecting Good or Evil, Karma and Requital now. So for example, mental functions such as consciousness, sensory reception, perception, mental processing, memory, deliberation, and cognition are neither blue nor yellow, neither red nor white, nor of mixed colors. They are neither long nor short, neither square nor round, neither large nor small. One can search for the shape of the mind throughout all worlds in the 10 directions, but can never capture it under a classification. So they're talking about citta again. And this citta is this um, general sense of total impression or the basic awareness. And it doesn't have any attributes or characteristics. You can't, find an edge to your basic awareness. It's just the basic awareness that is now filled with all of this sensory datum. The sensory datum that then the manas is reflexively starting to cut into smaller and smaller pieces. However, the mind of every sentient being, conditioned by ignorance and delusion, manifests false objects and clings to them through thinking and memory. So, one of attributes or functions of this manas, the manas Vijnana, is to interact with the alaya via bija seeds. So this is something that we've heard Gilbert talk about quite a bit. This alaya, the eighth consciousness, is always raining down bija seeds. Whenever there is a sensory experience. The concepts, the manas, there's the difference, the sifting through memory, and the perfuming of environment. So this is thinking and memorying. The mind does not know itself, but falsely claims its own existence. Although thoughts of a self and its belongings arise, there is no truth to them because the false mind is not an entity that can be seen. When we really start to look into this experience, what's happening, we can't find really anything that is definable. We just see this constant series of interactions taking place. And if we examine and investigate each of these interactions, we can't find that they exist on their own. They only exist in dependence upon one another. It's dependence on difference. So if there is no perception that differentiates, then there cannot be appearances differentiated into objects in space and time, such as the 10 directions, the past, present, and future. Dharmas do not have independent existence, and they exist only as differentiations made by the false mind, which thinks of all objects as existent and distinct, identifying this as self and that as other. So we see the argument that the Sutra of Detecting Good or Evil, Karma, and Requital makes with regards to this mind that differentiates, being like illusion, with no basis in reality. So the sutra goes on. I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I'm telling you this, the sutra is very short. It's only 9 pages long, and it is just chocked filled with just absolutely wonderful Dharma. You can get through it in an afternoon, but you will find enough here to continue looking back for years and years. So the meaning of mind comprises two aspects. What are these two? One is internal and the other external. So this is already a pretty interesting place for the sutra to take us because we're already dealing with a duality here. So the internal aspect of mind is divided into two. What are these two? One is true and the other false. The essence of the true mind is changeless, pure, perfect, unobstructed, unimpeded, subtle, invisible, free from places, and eternally indestructible. So again, this is just another set of descriptors for suchness. Suchness that is the mind undivided, you could think. So it's not Vijnana. There's nothing that is cut up or split or made apart in it. By contrast, the false mind produces thoughts, perceiving, distinguishing, pondering, and recollecting objects. Although it can continuously construct perceptions of various kinds of objects, it is false, not true. And this falseness that it's pointing towards is the departure from suchness. In other teachings, they don't draw this line so incredibly harshly, but what we're trying to accomplish or accommodate is cutting through the various obstructions that we have that prevent an intimacy or a direct realization of suchness, of mind undivided, because our habitual tendencies, our karmic tendencies are such that we don't even have a clue about it. We have no direct experience, direct knowledge, no realization. And so we only experience reality via this false mind. And it's this false mind, that sort of clouds or obstructs the truth of the interactivity that's happening. And when there is a lack of understanding regarding this interactivity, that's when we really start to suffer. The external aspect of mind refers to dharmas, or various kinds of objects which appear according to one's thinking. This is the distinction between internal and external aspects of mind. So the external is just the imaginary viewing of appearances. There is a teaching in the Dharma Dharmata Vibhanga Shastra. So this is distinguishing phenomena from their intrinsic nature. And it talks about shared and unshared abodes, which is something that I find very useful when trying to get a workable position with regards to internal and external. So what it says there is that the world's environment appears collectively to sentient beings. So, we one of the great arguments, in my own group, the students who come to hear me talk about the Dharma, um, most of them challenge me a lot. Um, they probably most of them don't even identify as Buddhists, and so they're always trying to find holes to poke in my presentations. Now, it's easy to give a presentation to a group such as this about the falseness of the external environment because we've heard so much Dharma about it. We've been versed in it for years and years. But when we're trying to find a way to apply this understanding, it really helps to just have more roundness. So the Dharma Dharmata Vibhanga says that the world's environment appear collectively to sentient beings whose active habitual tendencies correspond. So I just want you to kind of try to feel this for a little bit. The Dharma Dharmata Vibhanga Shastra, it talks about, individual mind streams. So mind streams within the same ocean, the ocean of mind. And the the idea or the perception of a sentient being is like a mind stream. So they've got what appears to be a current that belongs to them and them alone, and they're moving through the world. And they're directing this stream to go to this place and that. And the the world that we seem to experience all together is just a correspondence in these various streams. Um, the Even the idea of having been born and being alive at the same time. Just try to imagine, try to feel this idea of what entangles certain appearances of sentient beings together all at the same time. What habitual tendencies do we all share that makes us alive at the same time? And we have enough similarities that we experience the world largely the same. We experience things like gravity. We experience things like pain, physical pain, emotional turmoil. All of these habitual tendencies are kind of like swirling around this nexus of a sense of self. And so all of the human beings on this planet right now have enough correspondence with this sense of self and all of a certain set of attachments that we appear here and now and not on Alpha Centauri, on a completely different planet with different biological mechanisms. But these habitual tendencies don't fully correspond with one another because in every situation, we all experience it slightly differently because of the differences in those habitual tendencies. So what is shared is what we have in common enough, and what is unshared is what we don't have in common. So the example that I always think about is in a hospital, a woman is giving birth. And so the woman who is giving birth is having a very different experience than the doctor, than the nurse, than the baby. But nevertheless, they are all appearing in the same place. And there is a sharedness with regards to this experience. This also explains why different classes of beings can look at the same sort of thing and see something completely different. One of the examples that they'll use in the scriptures is looking out onto a body of water and how, say, a hungry ghost looking out on that body of water would see it as filled with pus and filth and just being absolutely disgusting. But an animal would look out on that same body and have a completely different experience. A human, a completely different. And I've read that a well-accomplished practitioner would look out on the body of water and not even see water. Maybe they would see something like a goddess, something that was beautiful and pure. And again, this having to do with the correspondence or lack thereof of one's habitual tendencies. This this idea of internal and external. Where the sutra goes with this next has to do with the Dharma body of a Buddha. So the Dharma body of a Buddha is unobstructed, unhindered, free, and indestructible since the origin without beginning. The Dharma body of one Buddha is the Dharma body of all Buddhas. And the Dharma body of all Buddhas are the Dharma body of one Buddha. So again, we're returning to this idea of suchness, of, of non-differentiation, of complete and wholeness, entirely absent from the idea of division. So for the Buddha or the Buddhas, this is their direct perception, their direct understanding. And so their bodies are, the Dharma bodies are shared. Um, you can't say that there's one Buddha. You can't say that there's many Buddha. There's just the Buddha body. So the karmas of all Buddhas are also undivided without any distinction between those of one Buddha and those of another Buddha, because they are equal and indistinguishable. Again, they're just continuing to present suchness over and over and over again. But it goes on to talk about the Dharma body of sentient beings. And it says, we should know that the Dharma body of a sentient being can never be destroyed. When one's afflictions have been eradicated, the Dharma body is fully revealed, yet the realm of the Dharma body neither increases nor decreases, neither moves nor change. Again, it's pointing towards this difference between suchness and consciousness, that which is or does not differentiate, that which does not distinguish, and that which is wholly dependent upon differences. However, this Dharma body has been concealed by one's ignorance since time without a beginning, conditioned by the force of delusion. It manifests false objects through causes and conditions. These causes and conditions are Citta, Manas, and Vijnana, the functioning of consciousness. What it describes in this sutra is the false mind, that which is always cutting up. is always differentiating and discriminating. Further influenced by the false objects, it imagines a self and its belongings. And through causes and conditions, then does karma to undergo the suffering of repeated birth and death. Those with such a Dharma body are called sentient beings. If there are sentient beings that gain strength from the purity of the Dharma body, so they would gain strength from the purity of their Dharma body first through faith, faith in the true nature, faith in Buddha nature. Their afflictions will diminish, and they will turn away from the worldly life to seek the way to nirvana. If they have faith in the one true reality, practice the six paramitas, and acquire the 37 elements of Bodhi, they will be called bodhisattvas. When these bodhisattvas have completed all the good dharmas in their trainings and ultimately discard the dream fabricated by ignorance, their names will be changed to Buddhas. This next part is quite wonderful. It should be known that sentient beings, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas are differentiated only by false names and words of the world. Their Dharma bodies are ultimately equal with no distinguishable appearances. Good man, this is a brief explanation of the meaning of the one true reality. So what we're seeing here presented from a variety of different angles is the true reality of mind, suchness, undifferentiatable, non-distinguishing, and consciousness. Sometimes Gilbert will say, mind versus consciousness. Though in a lot of the sutras, they will translate mind as from Citta, and so there is still some variation variable there. So now it has some very good practical instructions for us. Those who want to develop their belief in and understanding of the one true reality should learn the approach of two observations. One, more lists, of course. At least they're short lists. It's mostly one and twos. One is the observation that all dharmas are only mind and consciousness, and the other is the insight into true suchness. So it spends way more time doing the first of these because the entire sutra up to this point has been about insight into true suchness. So one who wants to learn to know one's mind and consciousness should observe anywhere and at any time that all dharmas are mind, as one does karma with one's body, voice, and mind. So this is some practice instruction that we probably encountered from a variety of different sources. In the Awakening of Mahayana Faith treatise, this was the translation that I relied on, called this the practice of cessation. But there are a couple additional helpers here that I find very useful. So one should be aware of all the objects that one's mind dwells on. One should not allow one's mind to pursue objects blindly without being aware. So I know in my own practice, especially at the beginning, I oftentimes had a reaction to the thoughts, like, oh, I don't want to see it, I don't want to know what it is. It's just arising in mind, and la 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 la, I can't see it, I can't hear it, therefore it's not going to affect me, it's not going to take me off my method. Um, this is, I can tell you from experience, you might be able to get a little bit of mileage out of that, but it's not going to be sustainable in the long term. And this sutra is backing that up a little bit. So, thought after thought, one should follow each thought and observe its contents, enabling one's mind to know that it is producing perceptions and thoughts, not the objects producing thoughts or differentiations. So this is the key point here. You don't want to ignore the thoughts, or you don't have to ignore the thoughts. And so when you are aware of the thoughts, their contents, and how they move, the insight, the truly useful piece here is that you have to remember that it is the mind that is producing perceptions and thoughts, not the objects producing thoughts or differentiations. Whether it's a mental object, a memory, or just anything, you are clearly aware that it shows up. You see it. And there is the knowing that, this thing, this object, it did not do anything on its own. It did not make anything. So you can imagine something terrible shows up in your sensory sphere, whether it's a bad memory, or a thought about the future that you could be dreading, or even just something that you find terrible to behold. Something shows up and you're aware. You don't flinch away from. And you see that accompanying whatever the appearance is, there's all this other stuff. Ah, it's bad. I hate it. Gross. I want to get away from this. I don't want this. And rather than s- imagine, cleave to the object as having power unto itself, you remember that it's the mind that gives all of these differentiations. The mind is granting all of these qualities. The object in of itself does not possess any of them. So one's mind produces innumerable perceptions, such as long or short, good or evil, right or wrong, gain or loss, advantage or disadvantage, existence or non-existence, while objects have no differentiating perceptions. Since objects never have any perception, they are free from self-images, such as long or short, good or evil, existence or non-existence. In this way, one should observe that all dharmas are produced by one's mind. Now I can hear Gilbert in the back of my head saying, I don't care much for them saying one's mind. It should just be mind. So in this way, mind should observe that all dharmas are produced by mind. Apart from mind, there is not a single dharma that can perceive distinction for itself. Never giving up, one should stay with and note one's mind and know that there are only thoughts and imaginations, no real objects. So whatever the label, whatever the quality that it is arises, you just be aware that these were created by the mind. They are not separate from mind. They are just mind. However, this is not called the observation that all dharmas are mind and consciousness when one's mind is a blank, not knowing what it is thinking. So it doesn't help if you put your fingers in your ears, if you close your eyes, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. All of these things are still going on. And if they are going on in the unconscious, then that means that manas is still fully functional. Manas is interacting with the various Vijnana. It is interacting with the alaya and all of these seeds. And it is generating more and more karma, which, though it be illusory, still serves to obstruct the true reality of one's own Dharma body, the Dharma body that is identical with all of the Buddhas. One who stays with and notes one's mind should know one's greed, anger, and delusion, as well as wrong views. And this should be a totally impassive thing. Again, when I was especially an early practitioner, seeing some of these things show up, it's like, oh, I shouldn't have that. That shouldn't be there. That doesn't belong. Well, what does that say about me? And departed far from the investigation of reality and engaging with this activity of discrimination and differentiation. The manas just continuing to roll like an endless gerbil wheel. One should also know one's good, evil, and neutral thoughts, as well as exertions, concerns, and suffering. When one is sitting in meditation, one should follow the objects of mind and know that thought after thought, only the mind rises and falls. So this is the mind as citta. It's citta as just the movement of consciousness, the flow of consciousness. So we can see that this is mind with a little m as opposed to mind with a big M, because mind with a big M is the absolute. And the absolute, you cannot cut it apart. You cannot distinguish between past and present. You cannot distinguish between low and high, because all of those are merely perceptions that are generated by the mind. They only have to do with the cutting apart of things, with Vijnana. What it says in the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra is that bodhisattvas must be wise with regards to citta, manas, and vijnana. When I was thinking about presenting this, because the first time that I gave a presentation in Gilbert's group on the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra, I couldn't go to sleep that night. I went to bed and I was just laying there and I was filled with so much energy. And it was just like, man, you know, I can do better. I want to provide something that is more useful. And so I was thinking about, what am I going to present next? What am I going to present next? And what came up was this Citta, Manas, and Vijnana. And so I've been racking my brain ever since I learned that I would be giving a presentation today. So how can I present this in a useful manner? And if I was just to talk about Citta, Manas, and Vijnana, I might as well just talk about the latest movie that I watched. And you're just like, oh, how cool was that? That was a really cool, interesting thing. Here's the plot. Here's how it fit together. Here's how it made me feel. So to just talk about Citta, Manas, and Vijnana by themselves is to only talk about illusion. And so I had to find a leaping off point, something that would establish a much more productive setting for an exploration into Citta, Manas, and Vijnana. Because while a bodhisattva should be wise to it, a bodhisattva must be wise to it, the functionings of the false mind, because to know about this functioning, this is a Dharma door. This is one of the infinite methods of practice that must be understood. And for some illusory sentient beings, this would be what was most enticing for them. This would be what helped them to make an approach to a deep investigation of their true nature. But it has to be presented and it has to be understood in the proper context. So we have to know about Citta, Manas, and Vijnana. And and I think that all of us should really look deeply into this. Should look into things like the Abhidharma, which describes this at length from a very different way than the Yogacara school. But just to have a wonderful set of tools with which to investigate our own experience and to help other illusory sentient beings to investigate their own. One of the quotations that leaps to mind is from Dogen, probably the one that I know best from him, where he says that the study of Buddha Dharma is the study of the self. And to study the self, one must forget the self. And so looking into the various mechanisms of consciousness, all of the ways that divisions and differentiations occur, that helps us to penetrate the illusion of an entirely separate self, to forget about it, to let it go, so that holes in its appearance of continuity begin to arise. And as Master Lin Chi said, you get to know the person who is playing with the light. Because that was the verbiage that he used. The true man or the true person was something that they used a lot. But when they investigated that or talked about it, it was the true man had no marks or characteristics. So again, pointing towards suchness, true nature, just mind. But there are innumerable ways to begin cutting through. And I just hope that with the presentation that I made today, that you have an interest in looking in. You know, when I think about this, Citta, Manas, and Vijnana, are these real things? No, but they are very useful tools, very useful approaches. There's one sutra that I love. Name I can't remember, but it's wonderful, and it talks about the true meaning of words. And so we've got Citta, Manas, Vijnana. We've got all these words that we've been using today, and it talks about the true meaning of words is that they don't refer to anything real. And so when we know this, when we have this, the bodhisattva who's realized this, as it says in that sutra, it doesn't diminish their capacity to use words, but it only expands it. They can be very free with language. And so we pick up as many of these tools, as many of these gems as we can possibly find in the mining of our study and practice. And we use them as best we can to awaken illusory sentient beings to fulfill the primary function of mind, of the Mahayana. Alrighty, well, I think that I'm going to call it there for today. So I will be very happy to receive any questions or comments if there are any. So thank you all so much. Sam. I knew I was going to get a raised hand from Sam.
Hi, Ian. Um, First, I wanted to say thank you. I'm always really grateful to get to hear from you and listen to the Dharma from you because you have a very how do you say, unique and fresh way of always presenting the Dharma. Like it's very effortless to be focused and engaged when you're teaching. So I really appreciate when you do. I had two questions. One is the first one is more, if it's okay, the first one is more of like a clarification question, and then the second one is more of a standard question. But the clarification I was hoping to ask you is manas and the reflexive bifurcation you were talking about. I don't know if I
Mhm.
said that right, but it was very interesting terminology, to say the least. But my clarification I was asking for is I was understanding that manas is it's this sort of conscious activity that is discriminatory in function. Like it seems from what I was understanding, it is this this differentiation, this discrimination that picks and chooses and grasps and pushes against or away from. And then this reflexive bifurcation, from what I was understanding, is it's the reflexive side is the habitual, it's habitual thinking, and that the bifurcation, or at least the whole term together, it's dualistic habitual thinking that seems to arise from these discriminations that are occurring. And I was just asking because I really hope to understand it correctly. Is that what that's supposed to be, or is there some understanding missing from that?
Both of your understandings hold because not only is it this reflexive bifurcation as a habitual tendency splitting between self and other, but it is also discriminating. And any discrimination that is made is also generated as a result of habitual tendencies. You know, to select this or that, to attribute any type of like or dislike, all of these things are going to be caused by ignorance, and then the habitual tendencies that result from that. But the taking of a picture of the sense consciousness is what enables you can imagine a cutout being made around different objects that before are just like a very primal discrimination in that we have a difference in shape and color. But further laid on top of that are the concepts and all of the attributions that are made by the sixth consciousness and by manas. So though there's kind of a little bit of an overlap between the two, at least with regards to my understanding. You know, I haven't gotten deep into the Yogacara Abhidharma. If anybody knows of a good English translation for that, you know, hit me up. I would love to do that. I just haven't encountered it yet. But your understanding is a workable one. But I call it a workable one because I can't definitively say that, yes, that's what it is, because that would be admitting an absoluteness with regards
Mhm.
to discrimination and differentiation. Because even when we're talking about manas, we're talking about a slice. And so there's nothing that can be absolutely said about it. Nevertheless, by looking at it, examining it as a slice, we can understand its function and how its function affects mind. But even as we're doing this, even as we're looking at this individual slice, we have to remember that it's not really an individual slice. You can't actually slice up mind.
Mhm.
But for the purposes of our practice, for our understanding of bringing assistance to other sentient beings, then it is perfectly great and wonderful to look at things from these various perspectives.
Mhm.
But we keep in mind that all that they are at the end of the day is just skillful means. And so long as that remains front and center, the heart purpose behind looking at things from different angles or as, you know, little separations, that so long as our heart purpose is in center, then we are like the bodhisattvas in that sutra who we can use any of the words, any of the concepts
Mhm.
freely. We can pick them up and put them down as they are appropriate. Another line from Master Lin Chi that really sticks out at me. He said that of his own sermon, he said, "There's no real doctrine here. There is just medicine for the times."
Mhm. Yes, and thank you. That And that's really what I was hoping for is I'm not looking to be like, oh, that's right, or like that's yeah, correct, or this is I'm making sure I'm within the realm, or like, pointing to the moon rather than pointing at my own feet or something like that, in a sense. But I will hold off on my other question because I don't want to take up too much time, and I will try to message you or something like that. But I just want to thank you again because that was an awesome lecture, and I really appreciate you taking the time to prepare that for us. So thank you, Ian.
All right, Robert.
Hi, Ian. Thank you very, very much for this lecture. It's very powerful, and I look up the Chinese word relating to Citta, Mana, and Vijnana,
Mhm.
and I just want to maybe check my understanding. It seems like Citta is the heart or the mind, the the undefinable mind part of it, the big M. And mana seems to be this word is it's not a very good word, but it's the intention
Mm.
or it's close but not close enough. It's almost the how you want the heart to be settled, well rested, or have it constantly turbocharged in a never-ending storm of thinking, differentiating. This is high, this is low, this is smelly, this is bad, this is beautiful, this is ugly, or you can it can be a very restful part of our practice. So that's how I look at the mana part when I look up the Chinese wording of that. So it is almost full of it can be full of energy, so dynamic, but it can also be very rest and settle, like when you stir up some powder in the water, you let the powder and the dust settle. And our practice is to settle and rest, or it can keep on going and going. So that's where the mana comes into, which is an aspect of mind. And then the last one, the Vijnana, is almost like I come from a database perspective. It's like it's a gigantic amount of information, like you mentioned, from all senses happening all together. But the the aggregate word they use is 是. 是 is like is kind of a lot of knowledge, but it can be very dead knowledge. If you just look at it, it can be how the temperature feel, how the light feel, how the picture look like, how the rose and the flower and the mountain and the sea and the ice, how everything look and feel from our senses is a massive amount of information. The information can be very dead if you look at it as is, if the heart is quiet and settled. The information can be like a volcano coming at you, like an avalanche coming at you. If your mana, the middle of the second word, the mana part of it is very, very active. Like when you're sitting, your mind is racing around. Or when you're very quiet and settled, when your mana is very, very, very quiet, very, very tranquil, very, very silent, then all these informations seems to settle. No matter how much it is, it doesn't matter. It's still a lot of information, but it doesn't matter as long as the cheetah part of it is almost like the mastermind of it. Keep it very subtle, very quiet, very, very peaceful, and you can almost say pure, like a crystal. So that's how I look at the three word Chitta, Mana, and Vishnu. In Chinese, it's Xing, Yi, and Shi. So I look up the Chinese word of it. That's how I came out with my understanding. I just wonder, I mean, is that where we are, what you are talking about?
Well, just to look at those three words, it depends on which sutra you're investigating that will determine what those words mean. Like in the Lankavatara, the Citta is the eighth consciousness, Manas is the seventh, Vijnana is one through six. And so they use those three words as kind of a hard division. And um, all of those are basically defiled. And this is what the Lankavatara says. And the Lankavatara talks about, purifying the eighth consciousness, wherein it is no longer called the eighth consciousness, the Alaya Vijnana. It's called the Tathagata Garbha. So that's how it is in the Lankavatara. It's there is an author, his name is Reb Anderson, and I really got a lot of benefit from his commentary on the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra. And he makes the argument that the manas is intrinsically not a source of defilement, even though in the Yogacara tradition, they very much did point towards it as the source of all defilement. And so long as the manas is active, whether in a very robust, busy manner or a very quiet manner, so long as the manas was there reflecting on all of these things, there was the interjection of the ego. And so it was going to be defiled. But Reb Anderson, he thought that originally, it's just the functioning of mind. It's just the capacity of mind to reflect itself. And so long as it's not actually bringing along any baggage, so long as it's just fulfilling that function of reflecting itself, it would be like the reflecting of a face of a gem or the reflecting of a mirror. Intrinsically, there's no defilement there, but it depends on what source. So I think that as you've described them, yours are workable positions, but you have to understand that when you encounter these in the various sutras, they're going to be meaning different things because, as I said at the very end, the real meaning of words is that they don't refer to anything real. So when you encounter these Citta, Manas, and Vijnana in your studies, you have to look at the placement in which they are appearing. So you have to understand the context, and that will help you to resonate more with the meaning that the author is trying to reveal by using them.
It is thank you, first of all. I just want to also add, it seems much easier to appreciate all this from the right view. I think in the earlier part of it of your recording today, you mentioned about right view, because right view seems to be a very good way of anchoring everything once literally just anchor from right view. Then Chitta, Mana, Vijnana, all these can be quite easily you can say understood or managed or able to observe or able to use during our practice. It's almost quickly put everything into perspective. Only part we can is mind, the big M part of mind, because it's impossible to understand. It, it's
But it is
impossible.
also the heart of right view. And
Yeah,
so in right view, everything orbits mind. Everything comes out of mind. Like that's the heart of right view.
yeah,
And so long as your mind is in the center and everything else is just a creation of mind, an illusory creation of mind at that, then you can remember that whatever the concepts are skillful means. And so
yes,
when we are studying, they're skillful means for us to assist in our practice and our realization. And then when we're discussing them with others, they are the skillful mean to help other illusory sentient beings do exactly the same.
yes. Thank you, Ian. Thank you. Very excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Arvind,
Hello, Ian. Thank you so much for
hello.
the presentation today. I had a question from a daily practice point of view in applying what you spoke about today. So, as we go about the day, when we encounter any particular habitual tendencies that we want to reflect on, from that moment of cognizing that there is this habitual tendency rising within me, what's the right way to use the Dharma presented today or the framework presented today to then come back to the method, if that question makes sense?
Well, once you have identified whatever is arising as just the habitual tendency, you've pretty much accomplished your goal. Like you know that this is a habitual tendency, it's created by mind. It does not belong to me. It is not me. It is merely the machinations of all of these different consciousness interactions. It's the interaction between the sensory consciousness, the Vijnana, all of those six sensory fields that they are feeding into the seventh and the eighth. The eighth is raining down these seeds, and then there's a response. So you just look at the habitual tendency as a response. And it's not your response. It's a response that is stored in the alaya vijnana, in the eighth consciousness. And when there is no awareness of that habitual tendency, there is just the habitual feeding into. But when it is clearly seen and you start to observe that, well, this habitual tendency came about, it arose in this moment because of whatever sensory field interacting with the manas that took a picture of the visual field and it picked out something that I liked. I like that thing, and now I want more of that thing. I am planning to get more. Here's how I am going to go about it. So you understand the mechanisms, and in understanding the mechanisms, you see that, oh, well, there's not actually an independent self doing these things. It's simply interactivity of these consciousness, and that's it. And if it's appropriate, given the present moment function, for that to continue, for it to follow through, then let it follow through. And if it's not appropriate, don't let it follow through. And be aware that karma is going to be generated. There's going to be some type of momentum. The habitual tendency can be strengthened, the habitual tendency can be weakened, but the awareness of the habitual tendency as a habitual tendency is the most important part. We only need to start dissecting it when we're encumbered by a sense of self and we require some type of medicine. But if its mind clearly sees it, then no medicine really needs to be applied. You don't actually have to think about the consciousnesses and their interactions. But sometimes it's really, really useful. And for a lot of folks, that is a very skillful entry to practice.
Thank you.
So, Rosalind,
Amitabha, Ian.
Amitofo.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. What I get is you are saying that the mind produces the object and the thoughts, and the object doesn't have a power of itself. So, but unusual for me is whenever I go to a wrong place, like a wake, someone's funeral, or a spiritual place, I can fall sick for 2 to 3 weeks. I am not using my mind, but I just fall sick. So it, I- I'm trying to figure out how does it gel with what the sutra says. And secondly, as you know, I just joined this group, so I've been trying to read as much as I can, and suddenly I develop pain on my neck. So the more I read, the more pain I get. So I'm just wondering what's going on. So if you have some inkling or some insights, I would appreciate it. Thanks, Ian.
Well, I definitely can't claim to have the penetrating insight that Gilbert does with regards to such matters, but I can share with you what I would think and how I would try to use those things. So the pain in the neck one reading, that could be a bit easier. Like my profession is that of a massage therapist. And so there's a lot of physicality that is involved with reading. So the posture that we tend to assume when reading is not one that's the human physical body is particularly well adapted for. And so we can get a pain in the neck, we can get a crick in the neck, especially if we're studying and our shoulders start to rise and our chin starts to stick out. These are just some simple awarenesses, the awareness of the physical structure of the body that can be very, very useful. Like if I am going to get on the computer and be on the computer for many, many hours, my hands and my wrists are going to hurt and my shoulders are going to get very tight. This is just a natural consequence of doing that type of activity. And reading is very similar. So when we're reading, we become dominant in our visual field. And I can tell you from my profession, I've seen this happen so many times. People who work at a computer, people who drive, people who read frequently, it's like they try to get their eyes closer to whatever it is that they are engaged with. And as they do that, it brings their head out of alignment. So if the holes of your ears are out of alignment with the point of your shoulders, everything in the neck and the shoulders has to work overtime just to keep you upright. And the body is going to naturally do that because it has an investment in keeping your eyes and ears level for your sense of balance, because that's a survivability issue. So one of the things that you can think about when you're reading, you start to get pain in your neck. You can do some basic structural adjustments. So for me, I think about tucking the chin back at the same time that I imagine a string is pulling the top of my head. And so this puts the head into alignment. And so if this is a purely muscular situation, then this will be a very efficacious fix. Another thing that you can do is while you're sitting, you're reading, and you start to get that pain, just sit and meditate for 5 minutes. Sit, meditate, be aware of the body, and relax. You will probably notice that your shoulders are riding really high and maybe you've got your head squashed down. And so these could be very, very helpful for you. Now, with regards to the prolonged periods of sickness that you encounter, either when you said you go to a wake, or some type of spiritual place.
Yeah, or certain countries, like every time I go into Thailand, I come back again 2 3 weeks, fever, flu continuously. So it's really, really weird.
Well, you might have like an abundance of receptive energy, so yin energy. And folks who have a lot of yin energy, they tend to act like a sponge when they go places. And so they can just fill up with stuff. So there are some things that you can do that I'm familiar with, some of the practices that I've encountered. You can spend time sitting with your back to the sun. So you want the sun directly shining on your back. And so just sit there and allow that sunlight to penetrate your body. Sunlight is very yang, and so that might be something that can help you. Um, Another thing that I do in my own life and practice when I start to feel like I'm picking something up, if you can feel like something is like an energy is like encroaching, um, I like sandalwood incense, sandalwood oil, or I will just put my hands on something that's metal or wood and send it in. But this is these are just some of the practices that I engage in. Um, what you should remember is that None of these things, these attributes, belong to you as a person. These are just habitual tendencies caused by karmic formations. They're all illusory in nature, but these are uh, illusions with which to practice. And so you don't want to ignore them, you don't want to push them away, you don't want to pretend that nothing's going to happen. But you also don't want to have the idea that, oh, I'm about to go travel, I'm about to go to a wake. That means that I'm going to be really sick. You just want to know that, there's been a pattern that's happened in the past. So let me keep my eyes open and I'll see if it happens to develop this time. And you know what? I'm going to wear my sandalwood beads. I'm going to dab essential oil of sandalwood around my neck, around my kidneys, and we'll see what happens. But you you don't want to put mind on the path of making something happen. So you want to be aware of the tendency, but you don't want to invest in it. So those are just a whole plethora of things that you might find helpful. Santa.
It's extremely helpful. Thank you so much, Ian.
Thank you for this wonderful lecture, Ian. Great sutra that I'm like really wanting to get into. And I wanted to share that when you taught the Nirmochana Sutra, my head was tingling. So if you couldn't sleep that night, well, you know what? You were transmitting a lot of energy. And I could feel it. So thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
I hope that you'll be able to sleep well tonight. I hope everybody will be able to sleep well. It's definitely not my intention to keep everybody up.
To beaming.
All right.
Oh,
Well,
also, I found another source for the sutra. I'm putting it in the chat. Master Xuanhua's commentary. So it's really long, but there it is. I'll send it to you as well. Because
happy day. Oh, I'm always so delighted when I can find a sutra that I've been looking for that I had previously been barred from for being just such an American. I only have one language that I can kind of speak and read. And there's so many treasures in Sanskrit and Tibetan and Chinese. So man, it's such a wonderful thing to find a new jewel that I can actually hold and examine. All right, well, I feel like we've reached the end of our time today, but thank you so much for your wonderful questions. Thank you so much for paying attention, for practicing, for helping to uplift sentient beings. Any merit that was generated from what I have presented today, I transfer to the benefit of all sentient beings so that they might awaken to their true nature. Amitofo.